Welcome to Crime Line. I'm your host, David. Today, we step back to Christmas 1996, a time that should have been filled with joy and childhood wonder, but instead became the setting for one of America's most baffling and tragic unsolved mysteries. In the affluent community of Boulder, Colorado, a 6-year-old child beauty queen, JonBenét Ramsey, vanished from her bed, only to be found brutally murdered in the basement of her own home hours later. What followed was a media firestorm, an investigation plagued by controversy, and a whirlwind of theories that continue to grip the public imagination. Join us as we delve into the chilling details of the JonBenét Ramsey case, a story of innocence lost and questions that still demand answers, nearly 3 decades later. In the heart of Boulder, Colorado, lived a 6-year-old girl named JonBenét Ramsey, a child whose bright smile and boundless energy were already making waves. Born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia, JonBenét was more than just a little girl. She was a budding star in the world of child beauty pageants. With her bouncy blonde hair, often styled in captivating ways, and a poise that belied her young age, she charmed judges and audiences alike. She wasn't just a participant, she was a winner. Already a veteran of the pageant circuit, having collected an array of titles such as Little Miss Colorado, America's Royale Miss, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. These competitions showcased her in glittery costumes, performing with a confidence that many adults would envy. Beyond the dazzling lights of the stage, she was a kindergartner at High Peaks Elementary School, living what appeared to be a privileged and doted-upon life, a life that was tragically and very publicly cut short. JonBenét's world was centered around her affluent family in their grand, 15-room Tudor-style home in the University Hill neighborhood of Boulder, Colorado, a picturesque city nestled against the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Her father, JonBenét Ramsey, was a man of considerable success, a former naval officer. He had built a thriving career in the tech industry, serving as the president and CEO of Access Graphics, a billion-dollar computer services company. This success afforded the family a comfortable, even luxurious, lifestyle. Her mother, Patsy Ramsey, brought her own touch of glamour and southern charm to the household. A former beauty queen herself, Patsy had been crowned Miss West Virginia in 1977 and had also competed in the Miss America pageant. It was often suggested that Patsy was the driving force behind JonBenét's involvement in the pageant world, perhaps seeing a reflection of her own past aspirations in her young daughter. Completing the immediate family unit was JonBenét's older brother, Burke. At 9 years old when the tragedy struck, Burke was 3 years JonBenét's senior. The dynamics within this seemingly picture-perfect family would soon come under intense and often harsh public and police scrutiny in the wake of the unimaginable events that were to unfold. The Christmas festivities of 1996 had just settled over the Ramsey household in Boulder, Colorado. A day filled with the joy and laughter typical of the season, but the tranquility was shattered in the pre-dawn hours of December 26th. At approximately 5:52 a.m., a frantic call was placed to 911. On the other end of the line was Patsy Ramsey, her voice choked with panic. She told the dispatcher, in a breathless and sometimes hard-to-understand torrent of words, that her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, was gone. "We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please," she pleaded. Patsy reported that she had just discovered her daughter was missing from her bed and, more alarmingly, that she had found a ransom note. The peace of the holiday morning had been irrevocably broken, replaced by a sense of dread and the urgent, terrifying pronouncement JonBenét had been taken. This call set in motion a chain of events that would captivate and horrify the nation for years to come. Adding to the terror of JonBenét's disappearance was the discovery Patsy Ramsey claimed to have made a ransom note. This wasn't a hastily scribbled demand. It was an unusually long, 2.5-page letter, purportedly penned by a small foreign faction calling themselves SBTC. Patsy stated she found it laid out on the back kitchen staircase of their home. The note written on a notepad belonging to the Ramsey family with a pen also from the house, demanded the specific sum of $118,000 for JonBenét's safe return, an amount remarkably close to a recent bonus John Ramsey had received. The letter contained a chilling warning against involving the police or an errant G-man, threatening that JonBenét would be beheaded if their instructions weren't followed. It also included oddly specific instructions for the money drop and strange phrases like victory and hence. The note itself would become one of the most scrutinized and debated pieces of evidence in the case, with its unusual length, the use of the family's own stationery, and the peculiar phrasing fueling countless theories about its true author and intent. As the morning of December 26th wore on, the initial flurry of police activity and the agonizing wait for any word from the supposed kidnappers yielded nothing. The ransom note had instructed John Ramsey to await a call between 8 and 10 a.m., but that window passed with an eerie silence. Frustration and desperation mounted. Around 1:00 p.m., nearly 7 hours after Patsy's frantic 911 call, Detective Linda Arndt, who was present at the Ramsey home, suggested to John Ramsey that he conduct a top-to-bottom search of the house to see if anything seemed amiss or out of place, accompanied by a family friend, Fleet White. John headed to the basement. It was there, in a rarely used, windowless room, often referred to as the wine cellar, that the horrifying discovery was made. John Ramsey found his 6-year-old daughter's lifeless body. She was wrapped in her white blanket. A nylon cord was around her neck. Her wrists were bound above her head, and duct tape covered her mouth. The nightmare of a kidnapping had transformed into the far more devastating reality of a murder scene within their own home. The discovery of JonBenét's body by her father immediately set off a chaotic chain of actions that would later draw severe criticism and complicate the investigation immeasurably. Upon finding his daughter, a distraught John Ramsey carried her body upstairs from the basement. This act, while understandable from a grieving father's perspective, inadvertently disturbed the primary crime scene. The white blanket she was found with was also removed. Furthermore, in the initial hours after Patsy's 911 call reporting a kidnapping, the Ramsey home wasn't treated with the stringent protocols typically applied to a potential homicide. Friends and victim advocates were allowed into the house, moving around and even cleaning in some areas, such as the kitchen, before JonBenét was found. Detective Linda Arndt, the first detective on scene, later stated she was alone with the Ramseys and their friends for a period, and the house was not immediately sealed off as a major crime scene. These early missteps led to widespread accusations that the Boulder Police Department had mishandled the crucial initial stages of the investigation, potentially contaminating or overlooking vital forensic evidence that could have shed light on who was responsible for the little girl's death. The official autopsy on JonBenét Ramsey was performed by the Boulder County coroner, Dr. John Meyer, and it painted a grim picture of her final moments. The findings, released to a shocked public, confirmed that the 6-year-old's death was a homicide. The primary cause of death was determined to be asphyxia by strangulation. This was associated with a ligature, identified as a garrote fashioned from a length of nylon cord and the broken handle of a paintbrush, which had been tightened around her neck. Compounding this brutality, the autopsy also revealed a significant craniocerebral trauma, specifically an 8.5-inch fracture on the right side of her skull. This severe head injury, believed to have been inflicted by a blunt object, was a major contributing factor to her death, likely rendering her unconscious or causing significant brain injury before or during the strangulation. The presence of these two distinct and severe injuries added layers of complexity to understanding the sequence of events and the nature of the assault she endured. Further compounding the horror of JonBenét's murder, the autopsy findings also indicated that she had been subjected to a sexual assault, while the publicly released details were, quite understandably, guarded. The coroner's report noted injuries consistent with such an assault. This aspect of the crime added another disturbing layer to the investigation, raising questions about the motive behind the attack and the profile of the perpetrator. The evidence suggested a possible sexual component to the crime, which became a significant focus for investigators as they tried to piece together what happened in the final hours of JonBenét's life. This particular finding also fueled much public and media discussion, often veering into speculative territory, further highlighting the tragic and predatory nature of the violence inflicted upon the young girl. The Boulder Police Department, a relatively small agency more accustomed to dealing with petty crimes in a university town, found itself thrust into the national spotlight with a high-profile, complex homicide. Almost immediately, their handling of the JonBenét Ramsey case came under intense scrutiny and widespread criticism, beyond the initial mishandling of the crime scene, allowing it to be compromised, and JonBenét's body to be moved. Investigative experts and media outlets pointed to a series of perceived missteps. Critics argued that the police may have focused too quickly and too narrowly on the Ramsey family as suspects, potentially overlooking or failing to vigorously pursue leads pointing to an outside intruder. There were also questions raised about the department's experience with such major cases, the coordination or lack thereof with other law enforcement agencies like the FBI in the early stages, and their interactions with the media, which often seemed defensive or reactive. The very public nature of these criticisms, including some from experienced investigators who later became involved or reviewed the case, created an atmosphere of doubt around the official investigation, further entrenching the mystery and fueling public distrust. The murder of a 6-year-old beauty queen in her affluent family's home on Christmas night was, tragically, a story tailor-made for sensational media coverage. From the moment the news broke, the JonBenét Ramsey case ignited a media firestorm that few, if any, had ever witnessed. Local news outlets were quickly joined by national and international press, all descending upon Boulder, Colorado. Tabloids, 24-hour news channels, and mainstream newspapers alike feasted on every available detail. And when details were scarce, speculation often filled the void. JonBenét's pageant photos and videos were broadcast endlessly, creating an image of a life lived in the spotlight. Even as the grim details of her death emerged, theories about the killer's identity, the meaning of the ransom note, and the Ramsey family's behavior were debated daily, often with little factual basis. This relentless media scrutiny placed immense pressure on the Boulder Police Department, whose every move was analyzed and criticized, and on the Ramsey family, who found themselves grieving their daughter under an unyielding public gaze that was often accusatory. The case became a fixture in popular culture, a stark example of how an unsolved crime could transform into a long-running and often exploitative media saga. In the confusing aftermath of JonBenét's murder, and fueled by what many perceived as an unusual crime scene and oddities in the family's initial reactions, suspicion began to swirl, eventually settling heavily on the Ramsey family themselves. John and Patsy Ramsey, instead of being seen solely as grieving parents, found their behavior and statements scrutinized and questioned. Factors contributing to this cloud of suspicion included the ransom note itself, written on their own notepad with their pen, its unusual length, and the specific monetary demand. The lack of clear signs of forced entry into their large home also led investigators and the public to wonder if the perpetrator was someone already inside. Even young Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother, was not entirely spared from the speculative glare, with some theories, however unfounded, suggesting a sibling altercation gone tragically wrong. While some investigators and experts maintained a belief in an outside intruder, a significant portion of the investigative focus, and certainly a large segment of public opinion shaped by intense media coverage, pointed towards the possibility that one or more members of the immediate family were somehow involved, either directly in JonBenét's death or in a subsequent cover-up. This umbrella of suspicion, as it was often called, would shadow the Ramseys for many years. As the investigation into JonBenét's murder continued under a cloud of public suspicion and intense media scrutiny, the case was eventually presented to a grand jury in Boulder over a period of 13 months. From 1998 into 1999, the grand jury members heard evidence and testimony related to the little girl's death. In October 1999, the grand jury returned its decision. While grand jury proceedings are typically secret, it was later revealed through a court order in 2013 that they had indeed voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey. The proposed charges were for child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. This was a significant development, suggesting that the grand jurors believed there was probable cause to bring charges against JonBenét's parents. However, the final decision to prosecute did not rest with the grand jury. The then Boulder County District Attorney, Alex Hunter, ultimately declined to sign the indictment and file charges. He publicly stated that he and his prosecutors did not believe they had sufficient evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in a trial. This decision was controversial, further fueling debate about the Ramseys' potential involvement and the strength, or weakness, of the evidence collected by investigators. Years after the grand jury's controversial decision and amidst ongoing public debate, advancements in DNA technology brought a pivotal turn in the JonBenét Ramsey case. In 2008, new, more sophisticated DNA testing techniques, specifically touch DNA analysis, were applied to evidence collected from JonBenét's clothing. This analysis yielded a partial DNA profile from an unidentified male, found on 2 separate locations on her long johns. Crucially, this DNA did not match John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, who had passed away from ovarian cancer in 2006, or their son, Burke. Based on these significant findings, the Boulder County District Attorney at the time, Mary Lacey, took the extraordinary step of publicly exonerating the immediate Ramsey family members. In a letter addressed to John Ramsey in July 2008, Lacey stated that the new DNA evidence pointed away from the family and towards an unknown male perpetrator. She formally apologized to the Ramsey family for the years of suspicion they had endured. This development was a stunning reversal for many who had long suspected the family, and it officially shifted the investigative focus back towards the theory of an outside intruder, though the identity of the male whose DNA was found remained, and still remains, unknown. Over the many years since JonBenét's death, a multitude of theories have emerged, each attempting to explain the tragic events of December 26, 1996. Yet, none have been definitively proven, leaving the case shrouded in a persistent and frustrating mystery. Broadly, these theories fall into 2 main camps. The intruder theory posits that an unknown individual or individuals broke into the Ramsey home and murdered JonBenét. This theory is supported by the unidentified male DNA found on her clothing, an open basement window, and a pry mark found on a door. Proponents point to the ransom note as a deliberate, albeit bizarre, attempt by the intruder to mislead investigators. On the other side are various family involvement theories. These suggest, in different forms, that a member of the Ramsey family was responsible, either through an accidental death followed by a staged cover-up, or through a more deliberate act. These theories often highlight the peculiarities of the ransom note written in the house, with their pen and paper, the nature of JonBenét's injuries, and what some perceived as unusual behavior from the family. Despite countless books, documentaries, and amateur sleuths dissecting every piece of available information, each theory comes with its own set of supporting arguments and unexplained contradictions, and none have led to a conclusive resolution. Decades have passed since that Christmas night in 1996, yet the murder of JonBenét Ramsey officially remains an unsolved case, a prominent and tragic American cold case. Despite periodic reviews, advancements in forensic technology, and the unwavering attention of true crime enthusiasts and journalists, the identity of her killer remains elusive. No individual has ever been definitively charged and convicted for her death. The case file, containing thousands of pages of evidence and interviews, still holds its secrets. The Boulder Police Department has stated over the years that the investigation remains open and active, and they continue to pursue any credible leads, particularly with the hope that evolving DNA technology might one day provide a conclusive link to the unidentified male DNA found at the scene. The legacy of JonBenét's murder is profound. It serves as a haunting reminder of a child's life cut brutally short, a family irrevocably fractured under the weight of tragedy and suspicion, and the often fraught relationship between law enforcement, the media, and the pursuit of justice. The case has permeated popular culture, sparking endless debate and ensuring that JonBenét's name and the unanswered questions surrounding her death will not soon be forgotten. The tragic story of JonBenét Ramsey remains a haunting American mystery, a chilling reminder of how innocence can be so cruelly extinguished, leaving behind